Hello, everyone. My name is Jamie Brandis, and I'm with the Colorado Small Business Development Center Network's SBDC TechSource program. I'd like to welcome you all today to the webinar, What You Need to Know About Technology Commercialization for SBIR Grants. We're glad you could join us, and we hope that you'll receive some great takeaways today. Very quickly, I'd like to introduce you to our Colorado SBDC TechSource program, designed to support science and technology ventures throughout the state of Colorado. Different from many accelerators and incubators that lead to equity funding, where you give away an ownership piece of your company, SBDC TechSource focuses especially on sources of non-dilutive capital where there's no equity given, and on technology commercialization and SBIR, or Small Business Innovation Research, grants. Colorado SBDC TechSource is a specially designed program that taps subject matter experts such as Ed Case today to provide you, the science and technology entrepreneurs and companies, from pre-startup through advanced second stage with direct assistance. That comes in the form of customized expert consulting at no cost to you and through relevant workshops and events in person and online throughout the year. Topics include SBIR, STTR, and advanced industry grant proposals and compliance, technology commercialization, IP protection and assistance with the patent process, market research, market sizing, strategic and tactical planning, access to capital, and much more. A few quick things. After this webinar, if you're interested in meeting one-on-one with an SBDC TechSource specialist or attending events, workshops, or webinars, please visit our website at sbdc-techsource.org to get started. Today's webinar will be recorded, and you will receive an email following the presentation with a link to the recording, allowing you to go back and view this webinar as often as you'd like. Colorado will be hosting the National SBIR Road Tour on August 16th in Boulder. You will be able to speak with program managers, 25 to be exact, of federal agencies that participate in the SBIR program, and the agenda is packed with great information. We do have some scholarships available for rural, minority-owned, and women-owned businesses that you can apply for on the TechSource website. We have an accelerator known as the Tech Venture Accelerator that starts August 23rd, and we still have 2 spots available for companies based in Boulder. We will be traveling around the state for an innovative business road trip with stops coming up in Gunnison, Grand Junction, and Salida in August and September. We're going to include all of this information in the follow-up email. I'd now like to introduce you to today's webinar presenter, Ed Case. Ed will be sharing with us for probably about 30 minutes today, and then we will have time at the end to answer any questions you may have. Feel free to type out your questions during the webinar in the chat space. He will answer them at the end as long as time allows, and follow up on any questions that may not be answered today. Ed Case is a strategic planning and business development executive with more than 20 years of B2B experience. This experience spans various technologies, including aerospace systems, scientific instrumentation, industrial equipment, software, medical devices, and pharmaceutical technologies. Ed has held leadership roles in a number of functional areas, including marketing, sales, and consulting services. In addition to his consulting practice, Ed provides services to client companies through the Colorado Small Business Development Center and TechLink, as well as through Foresight Technology and Science and Technology. He also serves as a judge for various business plan competitions, including the Advanced Industries Accelerator programs for the State of Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade. Ed has received his BS in Mechanical Engineering from Clarkson University and his MBA from Colorado State University. Thank you for joining us, Ed. I will turn it over to you now.
Thanks, Jamie. So as Jamie mentioned, I have a background in engineering, providing a foundation on the technology side, and an MBA for the business side. I've been doing business development for about 20 plus years and SBIR commercialization for nearly 15 years. In 1982, Congress passed a law that requires agencies with external research budgets above a certain amount to set aside a portion of that amount to be spent with small business concerns. And that level has changed over the years. Currently, it's somewhere around 3%, 3.2%. Anyways, this created a three-phase funding source that is the SBIR and STTR programs. And I'll refer to them collectively as the SBIR program for the remainder of the presentation. So while each agency does it a little bit differently, in essence, the agency posts a solicitation that requests research proposals that are responsive to various needs, enumerated in topics associated with the solicitation. Most agencies follow roughly the same cycle each year. There is a little variation, particularly as you have changes in administration. Details are on some common websites like SBIR.gov, but some agencies maintain information on their own websites as well. There are basically 12 agencies that provide funding. Now, NOAA and NIST are both under the Department of Commerce, but they solicit at different times of the year. The DoD solicits for multiple entities, up to 12 each time. So these include the familiar branches of the service like the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force. But they also include entities like the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, the Missile Defense Agency, and the United States Special Operations Command. Different agencies fund phase 1 and phase 2 at different levels. In fact, within DoD, the various entities are funded at different levels as well. So these are the typical due dates. They can move around some, as I said, so pay attention to the websites. Most of the agencies let you subscribe for email updates on their websites. So if you can figure out which ones have the technology topics that match what you do, it's best to typically sign up for those reminder emails so as things change, you're kept apprised. And as you can see, some agencies solicit only once a year, some solicit more than once a year. So we talked about a three-phase program. Phase 1 is a shorter project with a shorter timeline used for proof of concept. About 17% of phase 1 proposals are funded. As you move from phase 1 to phase 2, about 40% of phase 1 awards go on to receive phase 2 funding. Phase 2 provides the opportunity to advance the proof of concept from the phase 1 to a prototype. For some technologies, you might even get to a demo unit, a minimum viable product or MVP, or even a final product. For example, the logistics of releasing software allow for a faster time to market than setting up a manufacturing line, getting regulatory approval like FDA approval for a medical technology, or space qualifying hardware if you're working with NASA. Also, certain agencies offer direct phase 2 funding for technologies that already have been proven to some degree. So you do have that opportunity with an established technology to skip phase 1. So phase 3 is different. So even though it's a three-phase program, with the exception of the Department of Homeland Security, phase 3 funds include any funds that come from a source other than the SBIR program. Also, recognizing that some technologies take longer to get to commercial release, some agencies offer extensions under phase 2. Names vary by agency. You can look for terms like phase 2A, phase 2B, phase 2C, sequential phase 2, or phase 2E or phase 2 extended. So depending on the agency, it may have a different name. Always remember, the goal when you enter into the SBIR program is commercialization of the technology. So SBIR awards provide non-dilutive funding to advance your technology. No one takes a piece of your company. It isn't a loan. It doesn't have to be paid back. One of the huge benefits of the SBIR program is that if you receive a phase 1 award under the SBIR program, Since SBIRs are competitively competed, you can now take substantially the same technology and receive sole source contracts to provide your technology to any US government entity. So that means if you do a phase one with the Army and it's a technology that the Department of Homeland Security would like to buy directly, they can enter into a sole source contract with you because you've already competitively competed that technology. So on the flip side, things to consider. SBIR isn't necessarily for everyone. You need to meet a stated government need. You can't just come in with your technology and use it as a vehicle to have the government buy it. And also you're entering into a contract with the federal government, so there can be added overhead as far as audits and things that you have to pay attention to in the course of your business. Also, the timeline for writing a phase one proposal to spending out your phase two award is about 3 years. So if you have a shorter time to market, if there's competitive pressures that shorten that window, SBIR shouldn't be your primary source of funds. You can use it to supplement what you're doing, but if it isn't a fast enough time to market, it may not be the ideal vehicle for you. Since the I in SBIR stands for innovation, your technology should be either a new invention or a new application of an existing technology. The good news is the SBIR program has impact. Because it gets results, it is never in danger of not being funded or renewed. Both sides of the political aisle may negotiate about details, but the program has a long history of successes. Typically, those negotiations center around how much external ownership or in particular VC ownership of applying companies is allowed. So where do you begin? You should look for research topics that match your strengths and your direction. There may be multiple agencies that fund your type of technology. For example, space technology exists within NASA, but also with the Air Force and sometimes with agencies like NOAA. And kind of a cautionary note, if a research topic is not in your roadmap, you probably shouldn't chase it. There is an opportunity cost to proposing and executing an SBIR that could distract you from something that aligns better with your strategy. So choose carefully when you decide to apply to a topic. So as I mentioned previously, commercialization is getting revenue from a source that isn't the pool of SBIR funds. That can come in many forms. You can sell a product or service to another business or directly to consumers. And when I say another business, that includes business to business, business to government, and if you have an indirect channel, sometimes it's business to consumer. Government funds, as long as they're not SBIR funds, count towards commercialization. So deploying a technology with the military or sending it to space with NASA count as commercialization. So here's an approach that I like to suggest. When you think about your technology, think of it in terms of what problem it solves. Once you have the essence of what the technology can do, you can identify other applications of the technology. So here's an example of considering your technology in light of the problem it can solve. I used to work with a company that was funded by the Department of Energy to develop software to simulate the behavior of plasmas to design particle accelerators. So in this case, we're talking charged fluids as plasmas, not blood plasma. Other industries could benefit from these same simulations, like the semiconductor fabrication industry. So insights like this can help create a larger pool of potential applications and customers. So as you're trying to figure out who you can commercialize with, think beyond who prompted the original idea. So when you think about competition, your first competition is always the incumbent solution. Regardless of how inadequate that existing solution is, it is the method people are used to. You're going to ask people to change, and that's never an easy task. There are also substitutable products. If you lack a hammer, a rock can be used as a substitute. Sometimes there's homegrown solutions, and those can be difficult to displace because people get very attached to things that they built themselves. There's that not invented here syndrome. Once you paint the competitive landscape, determine how your technology is an improvement. Think about how it's better, cheaper, or faster than some of these alternatives. Another important aspect is to understand the value of your solution. While pricing may be based on the cost to develop the technology plus a little profit, if it only costs you $1,000 to build something, you want your price point to be more in line with the opportunity cost that the customer experiences so that you don't have $1,000 price point for $1 million solution. So this is a short lesson in value-based pricing. Since the goal of an SBIR is that your commercialization plan evolves over 3 phases, write your phase 1 proposal with the end goal in mind, a commercial product or service. There are multiple benefits to doing this. The most important is that you can make decisions based on a longer term product roadmap rather than a short term phase 1 project. So people often ask, how long should this take? The first time you write a phase 1 proposal, you should plan 40 to 60 hours for the entire proposal. Because this is a research project, the bulk of that effort, probably 50 to 60% of it, goes into the technical work plan. The commercialization plan can take 3 to 12 hours, depending on what the agency requires and how well thought out your technology and go-to-market strategy was coming into the SBIR process. The actual writing of a phase 2 proposal is still about 40 to 60 hours. But for phase 2, there are things you should be doing during phase 1 to write a good phase 2 plan. And that can add up to probably another 30 to 50 additional hours. The primary thing you should be doing is you should be talking to people. Do customer discovery. Understand the customer's problem and the cost of not solving it. If you plan to use an indirect channel or to have some type of partnership, you should also do partner discovery. You should understand what benefits come to you from a partnership and what benefits fall to your partner in a partnership. So now I'm going to kind of walk through some of the agencies and what their specific requirements are for the phase 2 plan. Again, thinking that your phase 1 plan is a subset of that, so having the whole phase 2 vision in mind can help you write a better phase 1 plan. So NASA probably has the most narrowly focused research topics of any agency. In general, they need something to support a specific mission, but they still want to know things about, what your market is, how you plan to market it, and what your ability is going to be to execute that plan. DoD is a little less narrowly defined, but again, in general, they're trying to support several missions with your technology. And you can see, again, they want to know what's your first product you're going to bring to market, who are your customers, what's the market size, what resources do you need to bring that technology to market, whether it's money or whether it's some type of business development expertise. And they also want to know you understand the market landscape relative to competitors and how you're different. So you should start to see some themes here. Department of Energy wants to know you understand the market where your technology plays and that you understand the market well enough to develop a go-to-market strategy. So they want to know who's on your team. They want to know if you're protecting your intellectual property, and they're actually going to ask you for a revenue forecast. And parts of that are actually going to include a return on investment calculation. Because if you're asking for $1.5 million roughly between phase 1 and phase 2, they want to know what the multiplier is going to be on top of that. So NIH is different in that they require almost no commercialization plan for phase 1. You do have to talk a little bit about the market and the problem you solve and who has it, but really not a lot of detail that's required there. However, what is required for phase 2, as you can see, is pretty extensive. So work towards these goals during the phase 1 project execution. And particularly with NIH, things like some of the market barriers. Do you need an FDA approval? How long is that going to delay you getting to market? Those are important things to be able to factor into your plan. So NSF topics are probably the broadest. They're funding technologies that are closer to pure research. With that said, they're looking for high risk, high reward projects. Again, technology that they're giving you $1 million to develop that's only going to generate $2 million in revenue probably isn't a high enough multiple on revenue to interest them. So think high risk, high reward with NSF. So you'd be well served if you have a business plan in place when you propose your technology. Well, SBIR is non-dilutive. You're asking for an investment on the order of $1.5 million, as I said. The level of effort that you put into your commercialization plan should be on par with what you would do if you're presenting your technology to an investor to raise capital, or if you're going to a bank for a loan. So we talked through the different agencies. So here's kind of a summary of the elements you want to consider. And as I just said, these are pretty common elements of a business plan. So I'll give you a minute to kind of scan that list and think about, relative to your technology, could you answer questions in these different areas? Because that's what's going to be required of you when you do your commercialization plan. So I talked about the work you should be doing during your phase 1 on the commercialization strategy. Various government agencies have different resources available to you above and beyond your reward. So they used to call it, some called it Commercialization Assistance Program, some called it Discretionary Technical Assistance. The term that most people are using now as a result of legislation that was passed last August is Technical and Business Assistance, or TABA. So some agencies only let you work with established service providers. So as Jamie mentioned, I do work with Foresight Science and Technology, who actually provides these commercialization services, particularly to NIH. Other entities like Dawnbreaker and LARDA support some of the other agencies that participate in the SBIR program. Some agencies will let you opt out with their provider and choose your own provider. Others don't have a provider, so you can choose one. And this is usually discussed in some detail in the solicitation. The key point here is that these services must be provided by a third party. You cannot spend these funds on internal resources. So various agencies provide various amounts of funding. In general, the funds have few restrictions. The goal is to help you prepare to commercialize your technology. Just a little history on this. In general, the cap used to be more in the $5,000 to $6,500 range. The $50,000 is kind of a direct result of the legislation that was passed last August, and it's kind of evolving as to which agencies are moving to that $50,000 cap. But as you can see, USDA is there, education is there, energy is there, Homeland Security is there, parts of DoD are there. So again, read the solicitation. They pretty clearly enumerate what they're willing to let you spend money on. And as was pointed out, this can be for customer discovery. It can be to help with some of your intellectual property protection, so patent costs. There's a number of things you can do with this, whereas the funds associated with the SBIR itself tend to be focused very tightly on advancing technology. So thanks for your time and attention. I'm happy to answer any questions that have come in during the presentation or that you want to ask now. If questions come up later, my contact information is provided. You can also reach me through the Boulder SBDC, and I'll also be at the SBIR day that's coming up on the 16th of August. So lots of opportunities to talk to me if anything in here was unclear or you just need a little greater detail. Thanks.
Thanks, Ed. So if you do have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat bar and we will get to them if we have time. We do have one question, Ed, right now. They're saying they don't really understand what they mean by proof of concept. Their device is a novel use of existing tech to solve the helicopter brownout problem, which costs the DoD $100 million a year. The only way to really prove a concept is to make a working prototype. So he doesn't get what they mean.
So that's a good question. So sometimes a proof of concept may be that there's something in the underlying science or technology that you're hypothesizing will work, and you're going to use phase one to come to a conclusion that yes, in fact, this will work and we should move on to phase two, or no, in fact, this won't work and we should look at a different solution type. So for technology like yours, the steps in your phase one could be that you're going to do certain things to enhance the technology or to make it more directly applicable to the specific problem. Or your technology may be mature enough that if the agency supports it, you're going to do it direct to phase two. So you're going to skip that 6-month phase one project and try to get to that 18 to 24-month phase two project right out of the chute. So those are options available to you. So you can do incremental improvements on a phase one and apply for a phase two, or go directly to phase two.
Great, thanks, Ed. Just seeing if any other questions come in. That's the only one for now. Someone is asking, do you do grant writing?
So with the SBDC, we do provide assistance with writing the grant. In general, because the SBIR is very technical, typically whoever your principal investigator is, whoever your lead technologist is, has to write the bulk of it because, as I said, a lot of it's built around what the technical work plan is that you're trying to execute. We can review grants, we can make suggestions. The SBDC has provided assistance in actually writing commercialization plans. So if that's the area that's less familiar to you, those resources are available. But in general, we do reviews, we give advice, we'll point you to other resources that are available. We can write parts of it, but the technology part is really something that you have to write. The area other than commercialization that can be difficult is figuring out what a government budget looks like, and that's somewhere as well where we can provide assistance.
Great, thank you. So we have another question that was a follow-up from that first question about the proof of concept. He was saying that's the fast track and wondering if he does that, does he lose his phase one funding?
Yes, you would not get a phase one grant. You would have to go right to the phase two. And reasons people don't do direct to phase two, probably the biggest one is that direct to phase two, the percentages for what gets funding are not as high as going through the phase one, phase two sequentially. So if you've got a killer technology, I recommend the direct to phase two, but there can be definite benefits to doing the phase one because you've got a higher likelihood of getting that short-term phase one contract, and that can give you a stronger lead into your phase two.
Great. So then another question as a follow-up to that was, can the end game be to sell or license the tech to a prime contractor? The device is not practical to bring to fruition by a small business because it requires flight testing.
That is a perfectly great way to do things. When I mentioned that you doing the partner discovery can be an activity you can do during your phase one. So if you know that you've got something that fits into a vehicle or a device or a subsystem that's developed by a prime, one of the things you should be doing also during your phase one while you're advancing the technology is trying to get into discussions with those primes so that you can do requirements gathering and figuring out how you would integrate with the larger entity that they're providing. So, so licensing to a prime or even non-prime, or sometimes you can come in as two equals, so you can have two small businesses that have parts of the solution, and to get to a whole product, they may partner that way, and that's the path to market. So yes, doing things with partnering where likely you're only going to get a royalty, or they might outright buy the technology, that still counts as commercialization revenue, and that is a very appropriate way to get to market for certain technologies.
Great. Then there's also a question asking, do we have resources to assist in identifying a PI?
So one of the requirements for SBIR is your principal investigator has to be an employee of your company. So there are things we can do to help you figure out what topics might match things that your staff is good at. With STTR, I didn't talk a lot about that, but the nuance there is with the tech transfer, typically you have a partner in a nonprofit research institute. So usually it's a university. It can be a government lab like the National Renewable Energy Lab down in Golden, for example. In that case, your principal investigator or your science person could be a faculty person. We haven't really done in the past that I'm aware of helping people identify those types of people, but I don't think that's outside the realm of possibility. So I'm just going to say it hasn't been done, but I don't know why it couldn't be done. So not a definitive answer, but that's the best I can do.
Okay, so then there's a question about protecting IP when going through this.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I didn't spend a lot of time on that. There's a few things you need to do. One is in the instructions again are in the solicitation. If you're bringing intellectual property into this, so say you've got a piece of software and you're just asking the government to pay for an enhancement to solve their problem, you'd want to declare the product you're bringing in. You would say up front, this technology exists and we built it with our money, and the government has no right in that. You also can mark certain pages of your proposal as proprietary, or certain sections of your proposal. So if you're disclosing things that you don't want shared publicly, that's how you do that, because people can request your proposal, and if you've marked it appropriately, the government has to redact those sections so that they can't be seen publicly. Then there's this concept of SBIR data rights. And this is a confusing topic. There are attorneys that do this better than I do, but to say it really simply, things developed under the SBIR, typically the government has a right to, a license to. So you can't sell the same thing to the government twice. With that said, if you build a base technology with the government and then you somehow enhance it, they do have to pay for that enhancement. Also, if you came into the SBIR with existing technology and they only paid for enhancements, they still have to pay for the existing technology. And the last thing I'll say is, if you're developing a device, while the government may have rights to use of the device, they still would have to pay you something so that you cover your costs in manufacturing and anything else associated. So basically your cost of goods. And you can typically add in some level of profit on top of that. So there are different things there. I'm not an attorney, I don't play one on television, but the SBDC has people who deal with this very commonly. But from a proposal standpoint, you just have to declare what you own going in, mark what's proprietary in your proposal, and understand that there are certain rights associated to the government based on you getting the funding.
Great. So another question is, are there different strategies than what you've described for direct solicitations compared to open solicitations, DoD specifically?
So I'm not quite sure. I'm going to take a guess at what's meant by this. So SBIR are open solicitations, but they're for very specific topics. There are other ways that the government acquires technology. The most common thing is like a BAA, a broad agency announcement. There are other funding vehicles. Typically, those come up on a website called FedBizOps, and you can register on that website, you can search on that website, you can set search agents, but that website is for everything from I want to buy a nuclear missile to I need someone to clean the offices at NCAR. So it can be overwhelming if you don't set your filters right. Some of these same things do apply though. I mean, you do want to make sure that you do a good work plan. There isn't necessarily a commercialization strategy required, but if you're doing answering an open solicitation for, say, the Army, you probably need to identify someone in an operational role who's actually going to use your technology. And one thing I didn't mention that's helpful with SBIRs is as you have these conversations with people when you do your customer discovery, getting letters of support or letters of advocacy can be helpful. Typically for phase one, having one letter, probably no more than 3 is a good idea. Phase 2, you have to have letters. If you don't have letters, I don't think you have as credible a proposal. And I would recommend getting 3 to 5 letters. And the format of those is kind of, this is who, so as the letter writer, this is who I am in my standing and my understanding of the industry. This is what I think of the technology that is being proposed. This is why I think it's a good idea. So I think I went way around the topic and the question that was asked. If I didn't answer your question, put something in the chat box again and I'll try and refine my answer.
Yeah, so he did actually clarify. He said that someone at DoD invited them to apply for direct to phase 2 and offered support for the application. So he's wondering how their strategy would differ, if at all.
I would say the biggest thing is they don't write letters of support in the military, but you get a letter of advocacy or memorandum of advocacy from that person that says, this is a need that the government has. We believe this technology solves this need by doing X, and we advocate that this technology get funded. So you want to get some identification of that support that's tangible in the form of a letter, preferably on letterhead from, if it's someone from Air Force Research Lab, you want AFRL letterhead with a letter that you're just going to scan in and include as part of your proposal.
Great. So that's all the questions we have right now. If anyone else has any, please feel free to write them in. Okay, we do have one. Should we get a cage code ahead of time?
Yes. I didn't touch on that, but getting all of your registrations done, and the biggest one is the SAM registration. That one can take up to 6 weeks. And I have seen companies write their whole proposal hoping that their SAM code comes through, and it doesn't. And without a SAM code, you cannot even start filling out the form. So do your registrations as far in advance as possible. So you need to do SAMs, you need a DUNS number, which only takes a couple of days, cage codes, all of those things. Start that process, I would say 6 to 8 weeks in advance of any solicitation deadline.
Great. Someone's just asking if the PowerPoint will be accessible, and I will send that out after this presentation. So you will get a copy of the actual presentation as well as the PowerPoint slides.
in relative to questions, I suspect that if you've never looked at a solicitation, the first time you do, you will have more questions. And that's the time to just pick up the phone, call the SBDC. Depending on where the question is, it could be me that will answer your question. It could be someone who's more expert in budgets. It could be someone who's more expert in SBIR data rights. But once you get into it, ask your questions early so that if we have to research them, we can get you answers in a timely manner and don't delay your actual submission. For example, today is the submission deadline for the EPA. It is too late to start writing your EPA proposal today because you've got till about 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Great, thanks, Ed. So I don't think we have any other questions other than there was one asking about if we will be taking things to Durango, which we actually just got back from Durango a couple weeks ago. And we are making an effort to make all of these resources available to the entire statewide. And that's where we're doing our innovative business road trip. So we are going to Grand Junction, Gunnison, and Salida coming up. We really are making the effort to help the entire state of Colorado through this program. So no matter where your business is located, we do want to help you. See if there's anything else that came up, but I don't think so.
And obviously we can set up a web call. If someone in Durango or some other part of the state we're not going to get to directly or soon enough for you, we can do phone calls, we can do web conferencing. We do all this to support things around the state.
Thanks, Ed. So thanks again, Ed, for presenting today. We know that many of you may still have questions or want some clarifications or further information after seeing today's webinar. So that's why the SBDC provides one-on-one consulting. All of that is confidential at no cost and available throughout the life of your business. To take the next step, to get more information or to schedule an initial consulting appointment, you can go to the TechSource website. That website again is sbdc-techsource.org. I do want to do another reminder for the National SBIR Road Tour, which is going to be Friday, August 16th. That would be a really great opportunity to meet with some of these program managers, get more information. Ed's going to be there in person, so you could talk to him there. But yeah, we're really excited about it and want to thank you for attending today. Hopefully we'll see you next time.